where my co-host, Lei Xing, and I, a left coast Wei Xing, and I will go over the week's most important and interesting news coming out of the China EV, AV, and mobility sectors. And there was actually just one piece of news that sucked the air out of the room this week that we'll talk about probably in detail.
Yes.
What Lei and I discussed today is based on our opinions and should not be taken as investment advice. If you enjoy this room, please help us get the word out to other enthusiasts. And of course, tune in again next week. My name is Tu Li. I'm the managing director at Sino Auto Insights, a global management consultancy that helps organizations bring innovative and tech-focused products and services to the transportation and mobility sectors. I write a free weekly newsletter that we pull many of our discussion topics from. You can sign up for it at sinoautoinsights.com, which of course I encourage you all to do. Good early morning to you, Lei. Can you please introduce yourself?
Good morning from the West Coast. This is your co-host Lei Xing, a former chief editor of China Auto Review, and this is episode number 118. So Elon is back from China and back to his tweeting self.
2 days, right? It's just 2 days.
Yeah,
right?
44 hours. And I just saw this morning there's rumors coming out that China could consider, the state council specifically, to extend the purchase tax exemption on NEVs for another 4 years. Have you seen that?
I did. And it tells me that the economy is weaker than we initially thought, and that it's important for them to find ways to keep these factories running, because anything over 300,000 RMB is considered premium or luxury. And we also know, Lei, that I believe around 90% of all vehicles sold in China last year were under 300,000 RMB. So it's really, really going to drive the manufacturing side, right?
Yeah. So now, we've talked about this 3 carats. So one is done, the 6B, and there's other 2. So not surprising at all. And usually May, June is around when these news come out. So I think it will likely happen, but the only suspense would be how long it'll be extended.
4 years seems like a long time. So
it is. I mean, I'd imagine you do it for 1 or 2 years, but yeah, 4 years is trying to keep that momentum going. So yeah, and so let's begin with the May EV sales.
Yes, I think you were getting people excited because I think on the Twitter tweet that you posted, you said June sales.
Yeah, I know, because I was thinking it's June, so
right.
Yeah, so it's May sales. Really, if you look at that list of 16 or 15, 16 brands, I think it's pretty clear that the top, let's say, I call it the BATL now. So BYD, AION, Tesla, Li Auto are clearly the front runners, and they're separating their gap between the others. Let's say from purely a volume perspective, consistently volume, month in, month out, and growing. I think BATL, we haven't seen the Tesla numbers, but compared to the others are still kind of struggling a little bit. And struggling will be an understatement for NIO, I'd say. Still going through that kind of switch over and not really good numbers.
XPeng beat them in May, so
yeah,
that should tell you something. And let me also add that Li Auto is even more impressive when you consider that I would assume average price of a Li Auto vehicle versus a BYD is 2x, probably. So pretty significant. GAC AION is also going to be under 300,000 for the most part. So, BYD is just off the charts. So you could set your watch to it, right? And there was about 50-50 split between BEVs and PHEVs, but GAC AION gaining a ton of momentum. 45,000 is very, 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 very impressive. These are the numbers. The 45,000 is, I believe, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, is where we thought 6, 8, 10 months ago an XPeng would be. Some of the more mass market brands would be. So it's really impressive that GAC kind of sort of came out of nowhere and is now commanding, to your point, right? A handful of brands are leading the way. So
yeah. So BYD, they did 1 million units basically in the first 5 months.
Yeah.
And Li Auto, I think, based on the current momentum, 300,000 units, probably they would surpass that. Because Li Xiang, he posted that he expects 40,000 a month sometime later this year. And in May, they were already just less than 2,000 units away from 30K. And Zeekr is still growing, I think.
Incrementally.
Yeah, incrementally. And Leap.
I would expect that number to significantly climb after the X ramps.
The X, yeah. And now
the Zeekr X, yeah.
Now this Andy and Robin are posting pictures together of the 1,000-kilometer 00.
Yeah.
Was it the 009? Yeah, it was a 009.
009.
Right? Yeah.
Yep.
And that model is over 500,000 RMB. So it's interesting. I mean, I think also what was going viral was in some of the chat groups was Li Xiang posted this chart, early adopter mass, that curve.
Yep.
There's this comparison of where NIO was and where Li Auto is. So Li Auto is right in that big fat space of the curve, whereas NIO is still in the early adopter, that part of the curve. And there's this gap right in between that's showing NIO is not able to cross that into the mass. You know what I'm talking about, right? That curve.
The hockey stick.
Yeah. So we give the benefit of doubt and see June is second half.
So in June, we should see a little bit of the ET5 refresh. I think they just launched a new edition or revised edition of the ET5.
The Touring?
The ES6. Yeah, exactly. The ES6 should see some numbers, significant numbers in June as well, I would think. So,
yeah, I thought ES6, I mean, because when that was launched and delivered, they were saying that they had like 3,000 units to be delivered.
Right.
But I guess we'll have to hold off on that.
Yeah, dude. So 2023 NEV sales growth between 2022 and 2023 for the first 5 months, up 36%. Compare that to 128 in 2022. So the growth curve has definitely flattened out. Passenger vehicles are down actually by percent. So let's say that's flat. So these numbers underlie why I believe the central government is looking to extend these subsidies for another 4 years, because they still feel that it's not strong enough to hold on its own without a little help.
And this is all under a backdrop of this massive price war that's being continued, not people announcing, price cuts, but these models launching at lower than expected prices. So now G6 has work cut out because they're doing a pre-sale next week, June 9th, was it? So now they have to figure out, what kind of, it's going to be between 200,000 to 300,000 RMB, but where did they price the starting price?
It's going to be way closer to the 200.
Yeah, we saw the smart #3 launch. I think that's right in the meat of the where G6 is going to be priced. And Zeekr X, right? Zeekr X is also the 200,000.
Let's make sure we highlight the smart May sales number, right? 2.6 thousand. Chinese consumers do not care about a foreign brand anymore. You better bring it, because I believe 10 years ago, Smart would have just sold just because it's the Smart brand, but now nobody cares. No one cares.
Yeah, it's mediocre.
With the exception of Tesla, which we still haven't seen, and you'll add to the chart once we get it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's no foreign brand on this chart. Well, maybe Volkswagen would be on there if they communicated their numbers, but
so Volvo, a couple of thousand units a month, like that. Volkswagen, they don't post these monthly numbers
because they would not be towards the top third. That's the bottom line.
Yeah. So other than CPCA, when CPCA announces, the numbers, but I think a clear trend is what I call this BATL really starting to separate themselves from the rest of the pack. Not saying that other ones are not, just relatively the momentum and the volume growth is pretty contrasting. And there are many of these third tier, fourth tier brands that their goal is just, psychologically is just get to 10K. and it's difficult.
Leap Motor's hanging in there.
Yeah, Leap Motor. I was saying Leap Motor and Neta that they're pretty much a 10K clubber, but
And we saw this week that Neta is looking to IPO in Hong Kong.
yeah, and they did 300,000 production milestone.
Yeah, that's pretty significant for Neta. I think that kudos to them. I think they're going to be a solid Chinese brand for the Chinese market. How successful they are in foreign markets, it's going to depend on how low they can go on MSRPs in a Thailand market, in a Indonesia market, in a Southeast Asian region. Because again, whenever you go to these countries, you're also going to see BYD there.
Yeah.
So unless there's clear separation on pricing, then BYD is just going to eat up all that space. So
we're done with EV sales. Elon a bit.
Yeah. I can't think of anything else. I'm looking at your DePaul is actually very surprising to me, because now that Ford has talked or has announced that they're not going to really be selling or focusing on passenger vehicles in China, I think Chang'an can really focus on growing that DePaul brand. So, which is Shenlan, right?
Shenlan,
yeah. Anyways, so let's move on. I don't know, man. I was hearing about some guy that visited China and blowing up the internets, blowing up the social webs. Had you heard anything about this guy? So
I joked that it was from Mark Dwyer, that it was Elon Stubble that visited. Yeah, because
so many photo ops.
Yeah, all the pageantry, all the red carpet, the treatment is pretty interesting to see. And then
this tells me, though, Lei, that this is still a very symbiotic relationship. Both parties really need each other.
Yeah,
this is not no. Don't get me wrong. The individual that came and visited 8-9 people and entities, he was doing nothing but ingratiating himself and Tesla to the Chinese people, the Chinese government, and the China market.
Yeah.
So he didn't tweet while he was there. And so that should tell you, for all the Tesla stands and the Tesla fudsters out there, how important the China market is to Tesla and to Elon's net worth. So
yeah, he didn't tweet. He comes back and he's back to the richest person in the world. That was interesting. But the thing is, so I posted that 44-hour who he met. I mean, every single one of those has certain significance. And you pointed out in your newsletter, I think you had a few bullet points about all these things that Tesla is preparing to do in China, but haven't formalized or haven't officially announced, right? I mean, the foreign minister, that's classic, EV diplomacy, or for the relationship, the U.S.-China relations, right? So
let's do this real quick. Can I just read my bullet points, and then we can kind of discuss as a. So in this week's newsletter, I wrote, the expectation that Elon would come was set when Bluma, Kalanius, Mary Barra, Farley, and others recently visited, over the last few weeks. There's a ton of coverage on his trip, and my take on why he came: to reassure the Chinese government he's communicating the importance of a productive relationship between the U.S. and China to the Biden administration, discussing the timing for rollout of FSD in China, perhaps with both Beijing and Shanghai being the inaugural cities, meet with battery suppliers to ensure linear supply of cells for his factories, especially in the U.S., where the whole CATL Tesla thing and CATL Ford thing is still creating a little controversy. Let the Chinese government know that the rumors about building a Mumbai Gigafactory doesn't change the fact that Shanghai Giga and the China market are Tesla's most important, and checking on the progress of the revamped Made in China Model 3, or the refreshed Made in China Model 3, and assuring or asking to make sure that there are no barriers to the launch, to a successful launch of that refreshed Model 3. So that's what I had.
Yeah. So, I mean, Qinggang, right? CATL, Robinson, that was pretty clear. The MOFCOM and the CCPIT, I think, were important because this is about more on the trade side of it. Tesla now exports the made in China long range Model Y to Canada. I was actually talking to someone here from Montreal, and he was telling me that. And then really meeting the Shanghai party secretary. I mean, it's all about investment, right? The Giga Shanghai, and then the employees. I mean, so one of the, I have a mole in that picture that Grace Tao posted on Elon meeting with the 100 or so employees, and she just told me she works at finance, so she tells me, Elon is just really modest. I mean, so
He couldn't be
yeah.
more of the exact opposite in the United States.
And there's also, I saw the Reuters article that he also met with Ding Xuexiang, vice premier.
Yep.
That wasn't officially posted, so we don't know. I mean, there's so much going on, right? You already mentioned FSD, batteries, increasing production, refresh Model 3. Nothing was officially announced, but look for these announcements to come.
Let's also remember that this is in the backdrop of 20 million by 2030, and the only way that happens is if China is, let's say, 30 to 40% of their sales globally so it's basically they need to keep this market share that they currently have in China, but proportionally larger from an absolute sales standpoint in order to get to that 20 million units by 2030. So Shanghai Giga needs to get much, much larger, and he probably needs to open up another 2 factories in China alone in order to satisfy domestic demand by 2030 to get even closer to this 20 million. So it's important for him to not only make sure that the Shanghai Giga is running smoothly, but that there are opportunities outside of Shanghai in case he doesn't want to put all his eggs in one basket from a production standpoint. So I think that's what's really important here. Maybe Wuhan, maybe Guangdong, maybe Shenyang in that area, because we also have to remember that he's only going to put these factories where there are suppliers already in place. Okay?
Yeah, and I think also the historical significance of this visit is Tesla, in fact, is the first automaker to completely 100% own manufacturing, right, in China.
Yeah.
And so this is back in 2018 when this restriction was limited on joint venture ownership, equity ownership. And I think this is really, GM and Ford are no longer, when you talk about China, US, this kind of diplomatic relations, Tesla is right there as the best example of the good China-US relationship, right? So he's the ambassador. He's the, what he says on TV about China, what he says about China, what he says about BYD. It's really interesting to use this kind of as a, linchpin or something for really on a bigger picture. It's not about Tesla. It's about China and the US, right? So
it'll be interesting to see how the US Elon relationship evolves once, and I'm thinking within the next 4 years, once Tesla loses a little share to the GMs and the Fords in the US market, where the Biden administration knows how important Tesla is, but refuses to acknowledge it. But once GM and Ford gain some traction in Stellantis and Toyota, will he soften his tone a bit with whoever the current president is, right? I'm curious to see how that evolves as well. So, because again, if Tesla wants to get to that 20 million, the US has got to be about 30% of that share, right?
Yeah.
So, and he still needs to, and once competition comes, because let's just say that Tesla is still they're like the BYD in China, of course, in the United States. They don't have any real competitors yet, not from a product standpoint, at least. So they're just building as many as they can sell. So that's going to change. They'll still sell in the millions, but from a market share standpoint, they'll lose here and there as the GMs and Fords launch more products. So
Speaking of the Ford's charging play with Tesla, I think was yet another bold move by Jim Farley, who's making nothing but bold moves recently.
Yeah, yeah, but that's the thing, Lei. You know we talked about they need other companies need to do this. Jim Farley's moves should not be standing out as they do.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he was saying that the GMs and the Stellantis are going to have to make a tough decision on what to do with charging.
If you can recall, was it 6-7 months ago in an episode, I said if I was an OEM, I would align myself very closely with a charging provider and take over the user experience to create a unique experience for my brands. And Ford decided to buy instead of build. Okay. And the theme that I'm hammering consistently over the last several months is every single major decision that the OEMs are making is going to be a make or a buy decision, specifically on the software, but also on the support apparatus for their electric vehicles. Do they build the competency themselves, or do they buy the competency? Ford has decided to buy that competency because Tesla supercharging is a proven commodity. Okay, the things just work.
That's why our good friend Elon he posted that he was going to Hertz, and I kind of replied. Every time I would just stuck to renting Teslas on Hertz because I know the charging network is going to be dependable, and I can't really think of renting some other EV because I have that. It's one of those psychological things. So.
That's an interesting move for him, but and good for him. So hopefully, it sounds like he's going to work remotely too. So that's cool.
But now Elon's back, and the next VIP going is Jensen.
Yes,
that's right. That's another level of kind of. I mean, he's also preaching that this let's not decouple. Right. This is what Elon preached when he was over there, and Jensen was talking about swimming in a sea of chips. Right. If so, it'll be interesting.
So Jensen is. So we know that Elon has vested interests in controversial statements and inconsistent statements, but Jensen now is also really nakedly. I mean, let me say this: his statements aren't wrong; they're not incorrect, but this is coming from a guy who has a $1 trillion company.
Yeah.
In effect, if they can, the United States and China can maintain a decent relationship. It doesn't even have to be good; it just needs to be decent. Okay. And the important thing to note is that Nvidia became one of the 9 companies for a little bit. I just looked at their market cap. They're at 986 at 8:30 in the morning. So in Eastern time. So you want to think and believe that these guys who their net worths depend on the China market are objectively making these statements, but you kind of got to take it with a grain of salt too, because
yeah, sure,
there's no way that Tesla is a $600 billion company or $800 billion company without the China market. And so, and the thing is with Jensen, it's more of, it's a sales thing for Jensen, but for Elon, it's a manufacturing and a sales thing. So I think those are the primary differences between Tesla's need for the China market versus Nvidia's need for the China market, because Nvidia has brilliantly innovated on silicon, and then they built that software system as part of that moat to create that ecosystem that if you want to use our AI chips, use our software, it makes things a lot easier. But it's not going to get any easier for the chip suppliers, especially because of that warning shot 3 weeks ago from Micron in the China market. So
yeah, and Nvidia's, Qualcomm still to this day are the gold standard, right? Qualcomm had that partner conference last week where Li Bin talked, right? Announced in fact that their phones are coming on that event, I believe. So yeah, I mean these EVs that are coming out, you more often than not you're gonna see them talk about the orange chips, the 81, 55, 82, 95 as selling points. They want the greatest and the latest.
Well, it's the equivalent of the x86 computers in the 80s with the Intel Inside stickers, effectively.
Yeah.
And on a side note, I would be pulling my hair out if I was a NIO investor and Lee Bin is talking about cell phones. I would be pulling my hair out. So I know that's part of their long-term strategy, but man, I would be like, okay, so you're going to sell people $1,000 phone. Maybe you should focus on getting that 6,000 sales, 6,000 units of sales up. So
I think for Li Bin, he's still putting these kind of pieces of the puzzle together, whereas Li Xiang is completely, I mean, he's just the focus on just the products and
maybe it's one of those things where we'll need to look back at how brilliant Wang Chuangfu's strategy ended up turning out to be with investment in R&D on batteries and capabilities and designing and building or fabricating silicon for themselves, right? So this whole vertical integration is really, really the major piece of why BYD is so far ahead of everyone. And maybe we'll look back in 10 years and say, hey, NIO with the app and high customer engagement and the cell phone for another touch point for my customers and for the branding and user experience along with the vehicle. Maybe we'll look at all of that as a whole and say that was a brilliant move. But right now, when you're struggling to sell 7,000 units in a month, that's very, very concerning. So
just the expectations have really, the bar has been set high, and you've seen these disappointing volumes for whatever reasons or that they have. You haven't seen that momentum, consistency, and growing. So
because they're not. That's the bottom line. They're not even growing with the market.
And the thing is, you can't keep on saying that because of a refresh, we have this switch. You're going to have a lot more of that in the future. And you can't use that as a right, to say that your sales are...
Actually, it's actually going to get more challenging for NIO because of the Lotuses, because of the Volvos, and because of the Polestars. And so the premium segment is only going to get more difficult in the next 3 years.
Yeah, and it's not going to be easy for the Alps and the Firefly. Even tougher, I think.
Yeah, so I had spoken with someone today about brand strategy and product planning, and not today, this week, and they were asking about the Denzas and the F brand for BYD and Yangwang, right? Does that make sense? And I do believe that it's just an evolution for BYD for sure, and they can't sell. I look at the Phaeton, the Volkswagen Phaeton in the U.S. market, an amazing car when it came out in the 2000s, was it 90s? Nobody bought it because it was a Volkswagen. And so BYD, there's no way, I don't believe, and you contradict me if you think I'm wrong, I don't think people will spend $80,000 on a BYD. So that wasn't the separation via branding is necessary. And the brilliant move here is that unlike NIO, BYD is selling all of their capacity, which creates so much flexibility for the premium brands that they want to launch, because there's not as much pressure on immediate sales volume from those. They can just make money off of those because 80% of their capacity is going to be long-term. 90% of their capacity is already going to be filled by Chinese domestic demand and export demand from their BYD brand. Okay. And so, because if you think of Denza, if you think of Yangwang, and you think of F brand, it's only likely going to be no more than 15-20% of their total capacity in the long run, right? From a sales standpoint, because Audi is less than 10% of Volkswagen's global sales like 2 years ago, right? So we have to look at that from the ratio, okay? And when Volkswagen Group was doing well, it created a lot of options for Audi and Porsche. But now that the Volkswagen brand is struggling in the China market, it puts so much pressure on Porsche, right?
Yeah. So I think sooner or later, not only for the Neos, I mean, Neos in particular, there are going to be subtractions rather than additions. They have to make these decisions, tough decisions. And I don't know, Neo has a goal of breaking even in Q4 of this year. I doubt that's happening.
Right.
And probably you forget about the doubling in sales this year. From now, it doesn't look like it'll happen. Again, I said if they can get to 200,000 units, that'll be a win.
That's a win.
There were the first 5 months, I think, was 43,000 units, and less than what. Well, we can't compare Neo with Ion, but Li Auto is doing close to 30,000 units a month.
Yeah.
Though Neo prices are significantly, their average price is still significantly higher than Li Auto's, but still, yeah.
And I want to say that manufacturing for Neo is super complicated too, because they have JAC, they have Neo Park, and they have their own factory now too, right? So I think there's potentially 3 manufacturing sites, whereas Li Auto is Lanzhou. Is it Lanzhou? Changzhou, sorry. And then they are redoing the old Hyundai factory in Beijing. So it's not just that Li Auto is only focused on the China market, but that's a huge reason why I believe that Li Auto is doing significantly better from a sales standpoint, but also a market cap standpoint. But then if you look at how operationally Neo is super complex from a manufacturing footprint, but also all these other ancillary things, their Neo app, their phone. And so product-wise, it's exponentially more complicated too. So again, can they? The question needs to be long-term. Can Neo walk and chew gum at the same time?
Yeah,
it'll happen for Li Auto as well. But at least with Li Auto, in 2, 3, 4 years, it seems like they'll have a solid base and foundation in the China market before they go abroad. So.
Yeah, XPeng, they've all, He Xiaopeng talked about efficiency, cost. I think this is an area where some of these players are not really good at, and Neo would be an example that they need to be a lot more efficient. So Li Bin, he's saying that, we don't want to cut workforce. We want to have the existing employees be production, right?
Yep.
Not the manufacturing of cars production, but employee work production. That efficiency needs to be improved. Yeah. I don't think they're at where they want to be cost-wise as well.
This is where it's important to note and highlight the Teslas, the BYDs, because, and historically Toyota, because if you're not manufacturing and operating and utilizing your capacity well, it becomes a weight, and it is unnecessary cost that the sales or the vehicles that you do sell carry. And so this goes back to Neo with not only multiple manufacturing sites, but likely a lot of excess capacity because of their struggle to sell. I mean, if we're looking at 7,000 unit run rate, we're talking about 84,000 cars that they're going to build a year. And you and I just mentioned that if they hit 200,000, that's a win. But they have much more than 200,000 units of capacity across those three manufacturing sites that we talked about, right? So again, a ton of pressure on the cost side, as you'd mentioned earlier, for Neo to build those sales in order to fill those factories with orders. So hey, let me ask you this, because I'm done, but I did have one question because I was trying to think. Pony launched a non-safety driver robotaxi service in Shenzhen. Unfortunately, I was only able to. I was there last month, so I didn't get to ride that non-safety driver robotaxi service. But
that's still for testing. I don't think you unless you have the.
Oh, so it's not to the public? Okay,
right. Unless you have the connections that have you ride in it. I think it's only for testing.
Yeah.
But Pony does have these kind of commercial pilots, I believe, at least in Beijing, in the Yizhuang area.
Yeah. So I've seen those in Yizhuang. But okay, so that answers my question because so besides Cruise and Baidu, who are the other global AV companies that are doing non-safety? Waymo is too, right? But is that the only three that the public is able to try out?
I think Waymo, Cruise, Baidu, and
Was it AutoX in Vegas? But that was only temporary, right?
right. Well, Motional. If we talk about Motional, the U.S. Waymo Cruise competitor.
So can we go to Boston and ride a non-safety driver Motional car?
No, I think those are for testing. I think Motional is only Vegas and LA, I believe, that they're rolling out.
Yeah. All right. So hold on. Before we open the room up, why don't you tell us about why you're in LA or SoCal?
Yeah, so I'm here for the ID Buzz long wheelbase. Sometimes I get to attend these events from before when I was in China. Sometimes they want some coverage on my Chinese platforms. So since I'm here, the previous China PR people, there's 2-3 other people are like in my position where we had the China experience, but now we're here in the US. So they asked. One is from local, the other one's from Montreal, and I'm in Massachusetts. So just asked us to come down and kind of cover it. And this is, there's only 2 models that I can think of that really represent the Volkswagen brand in America. One is the Beetle, and the other one is the Microbus. That really had a cult status. So they're trying to relaunch this as an electric version, long wheelbase, and this is launching roughly a year from now. So they have this global reveal. And by the way, the China factor is twofold. This is powered by a CATL NCM battery. I think it's 85 kilowatt hours, which gives it 244 miles of range. So it's not.
Oh, it's terrible.
It's not great. And again, we're going back to this Ford Tesla, charging conundrum that Volkswagen has electrified America. And I think that's where they're sticking with. And the other China factor is gray import or not. This would be something that they are considering with the right strategy at the right pricing point at the right time of possibly launching in China. Because I was talking with some finance guy, and he was saying that many years ago, this was actually, in fact, considered. They did some survey for Chinese consumers, and they did not consider this type of kind of bus style. But now, with how camping and that became a thing during the pandemic in China, it could be a niche. So I wouldn't be surprised if this indeed went to China sometime in the future. But
it would need to get well over 300 miles of range, because you market it as this like exploring drive across China, drive across America vehicle, and you got 250 miles of range. Come on.
Yeah, but for the time being, it's for the North American market because of the heritage,
right.
that anti-culture movement that with the T2, right, microbus.
Well, it does resonate. I do want to say it does resonate with a certain demographic that is a little bit older than we are, right?
Yeah.
I think young people think it's kind of cool, but it doesn't connect with them on the level it does with the folks that were in their 20s and the 60s and 70s, I don't think.
Yeah, so I've talked to some of these mid-management or some of the media, local media, and it's surprising to see how well they know about China. So one company they immediately point out is a company that starts with a B and ends with a YD. So,
we should take some credit for that, right?
Yeah, and I think they also talked about NIO. I think NIO they have some software bugs, interestingly enough, believe it or not, in some of their European vehicles. I heard.
Oh, that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah,
that doesn't surprise me. But so let's do this. Let's open the room up for anyone who has any questions.
And then the other thing is just FF91. So FF91.
Oh yeah, that's right.
The only thing I'll mention is that they are selling this at a huge loss, even though it's priced at 300,000, not renminbi, US dollars.
Well, at $309,000, they have to be hand building this thing. It can't be coming off a manufacturing line. Holy cow!
Yeah, the cost is extremely significantly more than the pricing. Let's just say this.
Unfortunately, all my moles left Faraday like years ago, so I still hear things, but
some of these people I knew from the early Le TV days back in 14, 15, so they've stuck with it. And if you saw the live stream, not the live stream, but it was pre-recorded, that YT insisted on doing all the talk himself. It was kind of excruciating to watch, but I mean, that's the kind of person he is. I think just 9 years of suffocation, right? And then continue to suffocate, and it doesn't get easier now that they worked on this for so many years.
Yeah, it is. It's excruciating watching Faraday, not just watching YT. It's excruciating watching Faraday.
So now it's I mean, just dragging along, right?
Could you imagine, Lei, being in Southern California in a meeting room talking about pricing of the FF Futurist Alliance edition, limited to 300 units?
Yeah. The only thing I'll mention was that they're making these terms, really complicated terms, the all AI, all hyper 6x4. It's a mouthful. So,
and for those who have never seen the FF91 in real life, it's probably bigger than the Micro Buzz, the ID Buzz. It's huge.
You can completely lie down in the rear seat.
So they are marketing the second row captain's chairs as better or more luxurious than first class cabin in an airplane. So
the only thing I'd say to them is good luck, because they've been criticized enough, they've been dunked enough. There's no point in dunking further because they're still here.
Yeah,
they're still surviving. They're still so
let's summarize really quickly. VinFast struggling mightily. They want to IPO, not likely going to be able to do that.
There's a showroom right near. I'll send you some pictures of a VinFast showroom, but it's not open yet.
Take a test drive. Go take.
No, it's not open yet. There. I think there's a VF8 and a 9 in there, but it's not even renovated. There's boxes and there's signs, but
so we're keeping on watch. Maybe we have this segment once a month for 30 seconds. iWays, WM Motor, Faraday still got the doors open. Innovate, yeah. Series, I think, is struggling.
Series is fine. Oh,
you think so? Okay. Who else? VinFast, I think, and then Rivian's going to be fine. Lucid is kind of in.
Well, they got another investment from the Saudis.
Yeah, of course they do.
But
of course they do.
VinFast does not lack money. That is something that they don't lack: capital, money.
Well, I don't know. I didn't hear that. So they definitely need that IPO money, because if not, they're not going to stay open. I heard the exact opposite of what you just said. So. And I have my moles in Vietnam, dude. So, anyways, any other companies that we should? Oh, the other thing too is Embark, which is an autonomous vehicle startup in the United States.
Yeah, they got acquired or merged
for next to nothing. I think they were trading at $3.
Yeah,
and they once traded at $200. So, and it was a unicorn, I believe, and now it's worth $67 million. So, autonomous vehicle, tough.
Speaking of valuations, I think Li Auto is worth twice NIO now. So NIO is about 12 billion, and Li Auto is like 30 billion or something.
Yeah. Hey, so you had posted. I'm not sure what the significance between the Valeo and Didi.
The significance is similar to what Bosch did with WeRide.
Okay.
So they're using these traditional supplier, 100 years of expertise in really, and working with the local kind of the players,
right,
to jointly develop these local solutions. And that, again, going back to Nvidia's and the Qualcomm's, that these foreign legacy suppliers are still to be reckoned with.
Yeah, I think that matters more to Vallejo than it does to DD. But
yeah.
And then speaking of ride-hailing companies, Uber's been in the news again. They launched over 2,000 autonomous food delivery vehicles, so about the size of a medium-sized bicycle, like those big squares that ride on the sidewalk. And I think you scan a QR code. So, Uber is really leaning into that platform part of their mobility platform. And so, yeah, I think Uber is going to be a player. I think DiDi is a little jealous because they were doing quite well against Uber, and then they got a 2.5-year time out. But DiDi is never going to be the global monster that Uber is. They wanted to be, and they were headed that way, but they got thrown in the box, and now they're likely just going to be a dominant Chinese player for the foreseeable future. So that is all I have, sir.
Same here. So looking forward to more chatter on Jensen's visit, more sales numbers.
And what will likely happen is over the next several days, likely into Wednesday, Thursday, we'll find out more about the things that Elon spoke about to all of his meeting partners. So,
and some of these forthcoming announcements that probably were being discussed but not officially announced, right?
Yeah, we'll likely get Tesla sales numbers next week, so we can talk about that, close out May sales. And then it's almost summertime. Our kids are about to finish school for the year. And
yeah, it's been extremely hot on the East Coast and cool here. So I got lucky, maybe.
It's been hot a couple of days. My sons are practicing outside and they're complaining. So it's really hot. Anyways, cool. Hey, everyone, thanks for joining. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We will talk with you all next week.
And have a good day from my side. Bye-bye.
That brings us to the end of this week's show. Lei and I thank you for tuning in. My name is Tu Lee, and you can find me on Twitter at Sino Auto Insight. That's SinoAutoInsight. You can find Lei on Twitter at LeiXing77. That's LEIXING77. If you wouldn't mind rating and or reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you grab your podcast from, we'd appreciate that as well. Even better, if you enjoy this show, please tell your friends about it. Please join us again next week as we track down all the latest news on China, EVs, and more.